All right, so we have a busy schedule today, so let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. It's great to see you all, and welcome to our session of boot camp. And this session, we will talk about getting Black and Latino students better access to non-novice and certified teachers. Just for a little bit of context, Ed Trust is releasing 2 reports in November around this topic. And so we're so excited today to preview our reports. And so what's on our agenda? We will introduce ourselves briefly, and then we'll preview the data from our upcoming reports. We also invited 2 amazing teachers to help us make sense of how does the data we're about to share with you, what does it feel like in the field? What is the teacher's perspective? So we're so excited to chat with our guests, Patricia and Nikki. And at the end, we will leave time for Q&A. So as we go through, please feel free to add questions, comments, reactions to the chat. We really want to hear from you all about questions that are coming to mind, thoughts that are coming to mind as well. So as I said, my name is Sarah Merotra. I'm a data and policy analyst at the Education Trust, where I focus on teacher diversity and teacher equity issues. I'll pass it over to my colleague, Eric Duncan, to introduce himself as well.
Thanks, Sarah. As Sarah said, I work alongside her and some of our other D12 policy team members on educator diversity and educator equity, and this aligns with some of the work that we've done around research and best practices and data, as you'll see a lot of really rich and compelling data that Sarah will present on student access to non-novice, certified, and high quality teachers. So excited to hear from Sarah and also hear from our teachers in the field. And feel free to reach out to me if you have questions, as well as Sarah, based on this or anything related to educators.
Thanks so much, Eric. And let's go ahead and pass it over to Patricia and then Nikki.
Hello, everyone. My name is Patricia Sanabria. I am a very proud Washingtonian, native Washingtonian. After college, I came back to DC to teach. I taught for 2 years at a traditional public school and 7 years at a public charter as both a special education teacher and a general education teacher. Currently, I am completing my master's at Georgetown University, and along with that, I am working at Empower Ed as the lead organizer, which is, yes, Wilson Tigers, woo! Which is an advocacy organization for teachers in Washington, D.C. It focuses on centering diverse teacher voices to lead advocacy work and change education policy in the district. And we actually have an event coming up. It's the Teacher Voice Festival. You can check out our website, which I'll put in the chat if you would like to know more.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikki, and I'm so excited to be here. I am a lifelong learner. I'm an anti-racist, I'm a student advocate, and I'm an elementary school instructional leader. For the past 13 years, I have had the privilege to teach in Title I schools, and I know what it's like to be a teacher serving students with the most needs, as well as students who face systemic racism on a daily basis. I personally believe that all students can learn and grow and thrive in a safe and welcoming environment. And so thank you so much for the invitation to participate on the panel.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Patricia. And let's go ahead and dive in so we can get to a really great conversation. So just a little bit of background. Why are we doing this report? As I said, our upcoming report focuses on the experiences of Black and Latino students and their access to non-novice teachers. And we define non-novice teachers as teachers who have more than 2 years of experience. So research tells us, and has told us for a decade, that having an experienced teacher matters. As teachers gain more experience, they play a big part in several important areas of the student experience, including increasing student motivation, homework completion, reducing student absenteeism, and importantly, experienced teachers are linked to improved academic outcomes for students. Folks, please feel free to add in the chat other ways that experienced teachers contribute to the student experience. We want to be clear, there will always be and should always be new educators entering the profession, bringing enthusiasm and fresh new ideas into schools. But many students attend schools where they have a brand new teacher year after year after year. Ultimately, teachers are the #1 predictor of student success inside the classroom. And yet, students of color and students from low-income backgrounds are more likely to attend schools with greater numbers of inexperienced teachers than their peers. This disparity is the result of a variety of factors, including centuries of systemic racism, housing segregation, and resource inequity. It means that groups of students are missing out by no fault of their own on critical learning opportunities necessary to prepare them for college and the workforce. So we decided to take a closer look. As I mentioned, decades of research has examined disparities in student access to non-novice and certified teachers. But we didn't want in our work to lump students together. We wanted to look at the experiences of Black and Latino students separately. So we used recently released civil data from the Civil Rights Data Collection to examine the research questions you see on these screens. We looked at Black and Latino student access to novice, certified, and first-year teachers. So we're going to walk you through our preliminary findings now. Let's dive in. So, consistent with previous research, we found that Black and Latino students, on average, sort of from the 30,000-foot view here, have more novice teachers than their peers. You'll see Black students are in the orange bar on the right. 24% of Black students experience high percentages of novice teachers. Latino students, 21%. Whereas when we look at all students, they experience 16% novice teachers. So we see that disparities exist. Let's examine our findings for Black students specifically. Here in this graph, we're going to discuss the percentage of novice teachers in schools serving the most Black students and schools serving the fewest Black students. Right now, you're looking at the average percentage of novice teachers in schools serving the fewest Black students. Take a second to pick a state on this graph. In a moment, I'm going to show you what happens when we look at the percentage of novice teachers in schools serving the most Black students. Those are the blue bars. What have you noticed? What has changed? I appreciate this is hard to see. You're welcome to zoom in on your screen, but would love to hear from you. What have you noticed about the blue bars that represents the percentage of novice teachers for schools serving the most Black students compared to the orange bars, which are the percentage of novice teachers in schools serving the fewest Black students? Take a minute and let us know in the chat. All right, so I'm not seeing too many responses. Oh, I see from Tara that the percentages seem to go up. That's exactly right, Tara. So others, please feel free to keep an eye, but we want to show you a couple of things. All of the blue bars for every single state are higher, meaning that in every state, there are more novice teachers in schools that are serving predominantly Black students. Let me show you an example in Maryland specifically. In Maryland, we see that schools serving the fewest Black students have 10% novice teachers. But at the bottom, we see that schools serving the most Black students in Maryland have 20% novice teachers. In many states, the percentage of novice teachers is twice as high in schools serving the most Black students. This means, in short, there are alarming disparities in many states. We then asked in our report, how likely is it that a Black student will attend in school with high percentages of novice teachers? This means schools that have 20% or more novice teachers. Here, we see that in many states, there are really large disparities. Black students, shown in the blue bars, are 3 to 4 times as likely to go to schools with high percentages of novice teachers as their peers. For example, in Mississippi, about 25% of Black students attend schools with high percentages of novice teachers, compared to just 7% of their peers. And while we don't have time today to go into all of our findings, we just wanted to preview for you. We asked these same questions and examined patterns looking at how often Black students experience first-year teachers and uncertified teachers. And we see that similar disparities exist across the country. In short, this is a trend that is occurring in all of our states, and the disparities are striking. When we look at the results for Latino students specifically, we see really interesting patterns emerge. Again, I know this is a lot of information, so don't feel the need to take a close look at it, but what I want you to take away from this graph is that, again, we compared the percentage of novice teachers in schools serving the most and fewest Latino students. When we look across the nation, we see that in some states, they're actually really similar percentages, but in other states, large gaps still exist. For example, in Rhode Island, Pennsylvania, Washington, Massachusetts, and New Hampshire, we see that Latino students are going to school with much higher percentages of novice teachers than their peers. Again, the disparities are large and they persist in many states across the country. So I appreciate that that was a lot of data, and we look forward to sharing more of it in our report that will be coming out in a couple of months. For now, I want to pause and give us the opportunity to discuss with our two guest teachers, Patricia and Nikki. So we're going to start out by asking them a couple of questions about their experience and about what advocates should take away from this presentation. We're going to save 10 minutes at the end for Q&A. So I will stop sharing my screen. And hi again, Nikki and Patricia. We're so excited to have you. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'll turn it over to Eric to get us started on the questions.
Thanks, Sarah, for that really good context, and appreciate some of the comments in the chat. So I want to get to those as well through the course of this conversation. But let's turn it over to our teachers. So we've had a brief introduction from each of you, but Patricia, I want to start with you. Can you talk a little bit about your experience as a teacher, and what has sort of inspired you to be a teacher and continue to teach in classrooms, and talk a little bit more about your role in Empower Ed and why you even chose to be a part of something like that?
So in terms of what inspired me to be a teacher, when I was in undergrad, when I was in college, I took a sociology class that had a unit in education. And basically in that unit, it said that DC had one of the worst school districts in the country, and that it was just like a horrendous place to go to school and to learn. And I was very shocked, and I was also very upset by that. And I decided then that I wanted to go back to DC and create a positive learning experience for students in DC, because as a student myself in DC, I had a very positive, or mostly positive, learning experience. My mom was also a teacher. She worked at Roosevelt High School. And it was just very important to me to give back and be a part of a positive experience for students. And then as far as my role in Empower Ed, so as lead organizer, predominantly I work with teacher advocacy groups, and they're broken down into 5 themes, which you can read more about on the website. But I work with the opportunity team, the equity team, and the representation team. And those teams of teachers decide in their groups what they want to focus on advocacy-wise in DC. So for example, last year, the representation team was able to get legislation passed for a Grow Your Own teacher certification program in DC, and that actually passed this summer. And the job posting for the person who manages that program is now on the OSSI website if you're interested in switching career paths. And so what that is a program that helps students who graduate from DC schools become teachers and then come back to teach in DC schools. And there's also grant money set aside for current paraprofessionals who want to transition into teaching to go back to school and get the degree that they need to be a teacher in DC. So yes, we work with the teachers to figure out what they want to see changed in DC, and then we help guide their advocacy work through testimony and through other mediums of affecting change in the city. And what inspired me to do that? I actually had friends who worked with Empower Ed when I was still a teacher. And as part of my master's program, I had to do a residency. And I was fortunate enough to get an interview with Empower Ed. My friend spoke very highly of the organization. I really liked that it was started by a DC teacher. I really liked that it's, even in the mission statement, it's very focused on equity and diversity, and that it centered educator voices, because we have so many people who are creating legislation and implementing policies, creating policies, who aren't teachers, who have never been in the classroom. And that's very concerning to me and something that I definitely want to see changed, and Empower Ed works towards that.
Thank you, Patricia. It's great to get to know you a little bit more. Nikki, want to shoot it to you real quick to learn a little bit more about your story. Then if you can kind of talk about some of the conditions in your schools that you see, in particular, the experiences of new teachers, or any sort of issues that you see arising from maybe a higher concentrations of new teachers in your school.
Okay, thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you for the research you've done and the report that you plan to publish. I think that this is a much needed conversation. So today, I would say that new teachers on my campus are supported in ways that they weren't supported 3 years ago, right? Right now, we kind of anticipate what our new teachers need. We plan for what they need and the barriers that may exist, right? And so one of the ways that we approach that on my campus is that every teacher who is either new to our campus, new to a grade level, or new to the profession is paired with a mentor. And you're paired with a veteran teacher, as you have explained it, an experienced teacher on the campus. So in addition to that, it's not just a pairing, right? Because when I first started out teaching and I had a mentor, my mentors were very different. My first mentor was, here, read this. And I was like, I'm not reading that. I don't have time to read that. I need you to help me in the moment, teach me, show me, let me practice, let me do it. And then my second mentor that I had was a doer. So if I said I need before I could turn to the right, I had a stack of papers laminated, ready to go, but she never showed me the how to. So on my campus, in addition to having this program, our district has a training program in which mentors go through to help us to learn how to be a mentor, right? Because if I teach well, it doesn't mean that I know how to mentor a new teacher. And so I think that is that. So let me rewind. Prior to this, right, prior to the change on my campus, new administration, I would say some of the challenges that all novice teachers are faced with is once you take that job and you enter the classroom, that is where the rubber meets the road. So everything that you learned in theory is great, right? It's textbook, it's research, it's all of that. But you've got to learn how to transition that into a real world experience for your students. Mind you, you're layering on this idea that you have 20 plus students, each have unique personalities, each have unique ways of learning, unique ways of communicating, and they have very diverse needs. But as a public school teacher, all are welcome, and I have to manage all of that at the same time. Um, Add another layer, our novice teachers are faced with deadlines, right? And sometimes these deadlines are about systems that we haven't been taught, we haven't been shown. We don't even know how to use the technology. What? I have to enter grades. Where do I even do that? What? I have to set up my grade book. So there's just so many things, whether it's technical aspects of it, whether it's relational. I have to have parent teacher conferences. Well, what do I say to a parent? I'm a brand new teacher. I'm not sure if I know what to say. And the list goes on, right? And I think on top of that, novice teachers are also trying to live out their why, right? We all come into this profession for a reason. And so here you are, 20 plus personalities, deadlines, systems that you may not understand, but you also then have to be able to think about, okay, how am I going to grow my toolbox of strategies to be able to use to help my learners grow, right? How am I going to show up at a meeting and really discuss data and be ready to collaborate with my team in order to impact student growth? And then I'm still looking at ways to reteach my students, and the list goes on. So I think that one way that we can support our novice teachers is by making sure that we understand that not only do they have these pressures when they come into the classroom, but they bring their lived experiences. They bring their experiences with education, which a lot of times, like if you sit down and you talk to a teacher and you really understand their why, it's usually because they didn't have a great experience. Some of us will share the, the silver lining, the experience that, maybe helped change our trajectory, but a lot of it comes from a place of wanting to do better than what was done for us. And so with that, I step into my classroom, I bring my lived experience, my beliefs, my biases every time I walk into a classroom. And if I'm not shown as a novice teacher how to process that, right? How to have conversations about that, how to check those things by reflecting on my practice and craft, then I could be more detrimental to a student than I can be supportive.
That's incredibly helpful, Nikki and Patricia, and thank you for sharing your experiences. I want to build on this point a little bit more. Nikki, you talked about mentorship. Supporting teachers in the classroom, of course, is not a one-size-fits-all approach. How can we also think about school leadership? We have a lot of district advocates with us today and state advocates. What do you want to let them know about supporting new teachers, and how can they work together?
Is that a follow-up for me?
For both Patricia and Nikki.
Okay. Patricia, would you like to start?
You can start, Nikki.
Right. Thank you. So it's a big question. And I think that it's really understanding that new teachers have needs that are different than a veteran teacher. When there's a new teacher on my campus, I go out of my way to ensure that they feel welcome, right? That they know that there's not a question that is unaskable. You ask, that's how you learn and grow. I think we have to take some of this, I am teacher, hear me roar, I know everything out of it, and understand that we are mentoring and supporting teachers to their greatest potential as an educator. So I think that's one. I think another thing is when I think about teachers coming in, they're very new. they are measured using the same evaluation system as me. I've been teaching for 13 years. I've attended so many trainings. I've learned so many things to grow my craft. It is unacceptable, in my opinion, to expect a brand new novice teacher to come in, hit the ground running, and perform at the same level at which I do. Now, we can get there, but it looks like coaching, it looks like mentoring, it looks like professional development, it looks like getting in the trenches with that new teacher and helping them along the way. Another thing that I think that I've learned personally, and I would share this as wisdom as well, is you got to listen. Right? You have to listen to what the teachers are saying, but then you got to read their body language and look at what they're not saying. So if you're having a staff meeting and everyone's saying everything's great, but they look like they just got hit by, a freight train, then you might want to ask some follow-up questions and really get to the heart of what's going on. And I think the more that teachers feel welcome, valued, respected, supported, and that it's okay to make mistakes, because it's in those mistakes that we learn and grow, right? It's through those conversations and collaborations that we learn and grow. So provide our new teachers with great mentors, provide them with opportunities to collaborate, provide them with opportunities to see other teachers in the middle of their craft, and then provide them with opportunities to reflect. And when you go to them, ask them what they need. Don't come with a list of assumptions. Don't come with a list of, hey, we're going to do it my way. Really listen and then respond to what you hear. That would be my advice.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Nikki about the teacher evaluations. I do think that there needs to be a lot of reform when it comes to evaluations across the country. Also, in terms of what our evaluation processes are centered on, even the language of effective or minimally effective, highly effective, I strongly believe that teacher evaluation rubrics and processes should be based on growth rather than a punitive framework. And I also definitely in DC, I think we see this very clearly. There are huge equity disparities when it comes to the funding of different schools. And there are schools that when they do have more funding, they can set that aside for novice teacher supports. And then in schools where they don't have as much funding, a lot of times that responsibility is placed on the other teachers in the school, which I think can be very valuable, but it's not as valuable as it could be when those teachers aren't paid for their time, or when those teachers don't have time set aside for them in the day to actually go about that mentorship. I think just like Nikki said, the teacher-to-teacher relationships are very powerful and very impactful. And we just need to do better in making a space for that so that we can continue to tailor support to our new teachers and make a better effort to retain those teachers in our schools.
Thank you. I'm interested, before we go into some chat questions, you guys have been in the classroom for a good amount of time. What were the conditions that individually that were in place to keep you in the classroom? And what lessons can we learn from your individual experiences when talking to advocates, when talking to decision makers, that can impact other teachers' ability to stay in the classroom or stay in the school that they're in? And Patricia, if you want to kick it off, we can start with you, and then Nikki would love to hear from you as well.
Definitely. So as I said before, I only spent 2 years at the first school where I worked, and I do think that I was fresh out of college. I had just turned 22, and I was starting to work with high schoolers, and I was grossly underprepared. I didn't have that much support. It was a very high needs school. It was definitely an underfunded school. And I was just drowning. And by the end of my second year, I really didn't feel like I was that positive support that I wanted to be for students. And I did start to look at other schools, and the school that I ended up going to at the time that I applied had a requirement that you had to have at least 2 years of experience, which I think was very helpful. It meant that the staff as a whole had more experience. And then I ended up staying at that school mostly because I felt very supported, and because I had the colleague network of support as well that I was looking for. I also stayed because I really loved my students so much. They were so wonderful. I got to teach so many siblings. I coached middle school soccer, and I got to see those kids go all the way through 12th grade, which was amazing. And there was a time where I thought about quitting at the second school where I worked, and I ended up staying because one of my administrators reached out to me and encouraged me and supported me until I left. And even now, we still check in with each other. She's still a mentor to me. I send her readings from my grad school classes that I think she'd be interested in. So I really do think that support piece is incredibly important. And not just because it helps you develop as an educator, but because it makes you feel like someone's noticing you and someone values you, and that what you are doing is needed and valuable.
So when I first heard the question, the answer is nothing. Nothing was done to keep me in the classroom. Everything was done to make me run for the hills and never look back. And I don't say that tongue in cheek, and I don't say that in a way to be flippant about it, yet it is true, right? So, like, I did alternative certification. So, I didn't go through a traditional 4-year program, and I didn't study education. So, I brought into the profession, into the field, a lot of skill sets that I had acquired in different industries, which have served me well. But again, no matter what they teach you in a technical sense, when you get there, it's not the same. My first day teaching real life students face to face 13 years ago, I had a student tapping a knife on his chair or on the leg of his table. They don't teach you what to do in that situation, right? So it's a lot of hit the ground running and learn as you go. I think the other thing is, I will be honest, I loved my administration at my first campus, but I didn't feel very welcomed by my colleagues at my first campus. I felt like they saw me as a threat. Don't know why, because I'm sitting here trying to figure things out, and I'm coming to you as an expert. I also feel like there wasn't access to resources. Where I would ask for the curriculum that was purchased, right, that I'm supposed to be using and following. And as a first year teacher, that's where you start until you build your toolbox. And it's like the other teachers hoarded it. They didn't want to share it. And I'm like, didn't the taxpayers pay for these things? So that was something too. What changed for me? Well, first and foremost, I teach because I love what I do. I teach because of the kids that are in front of me. I have always taught in Title I schools, so I've had the privilege to teach students who look like me, right? And so I'm not giving up on those kids. Like, I can endure what I need to endure to do what I need to do in order to support these students and be an advocate and help them to learn and grow. But what could have made my transition or my path smoother? Having those mentors up front. Having resources readily available, having someone to go to with questions and not feel like me asking a question meant that I wasn't an effective teacher, right? Having leadership who really invested in the idea of building collaborative teams, as well as data driven and student focused and equity focused, right? So there's a lot of things. So I currently stay on my campus now, which 3 years ago I was ready to leave because of my leadership, right? Because of the family environment that exists with the teachers here, because of the work that I know that I can help do on behalf of students. Students deserve quality teachers, right? Anyone who is considering the profession of a teacher has a why behind that. But without support, you will leave. And I will tell you, I left the profession once, but I came back, and I'm glad that I did.
Thank you so much, Nikki and Patricia. And we have so many more questions we want to ask, but let's skip to some really good questions from our participants today. And, going back to where we started in this presentation, it was clear from the data that this really is a racial equity issue. And Penny asked such a good question in the chat, and we can, talk through it, and also just want to acknowledge it. She said, there's this notion that these new teachers gravitate towards more challenging schools to fix or save kids. How do we address that mindset? I'd love to hear your thoughts, Patricia, Nikki, and I will pass it over to you.
So I have a quick response, or at least a place to start. Is that okay, Patricia? I saw you unmuting. Okay. There are some programs that prepare teachers that the partnerships and relationships they have in regards to getting teachers hired is at schools that have the most needs, right? So some of it is the teacher prep programs and how they're designed and the partnerships that they have, which funnel teachers in. If we're talking about a savior complex, that's something bigger, right? That's something different. And that's something that goes back to a conversation piece that I said early on, which is we show up every day with our lived experience. We show up every day with our biases. We show up every day with our beliefs. And so as teachers, I'm going to encourage us, which most of us already do, to fight against that, right? When I walk into a classroom, ideally, I want to see each of my students as individuals, understand that each of them have value and that each of them can contribute to our learning environment, first and foremost. And if I walk into a school and into a classroom with that set of beliefs, then I'm not here to rescue you. What I'm here is to ignite inside of you inspiration, passion, and help you reach your full potential. But I got to see you first, right? I have to understand who you are. I have to understand what drives you. I have to understand what motivates you. And I cannot be doing that through the lens of me. Right? I am older than my students. There's a generational divide as soon as I welcome them into my classroom. So I've got to get out of my comfort zone, get to know my students, understand what they need, and meet them right there.
Yeah, I first want to say just we know this, but how detrimental having that mindset is, and how it's not just detrimental for the school community, or it's not just bad for the teacher, but it continues this deficit mindset that we then build into our students. Which is very dangerous, and yes, very, very dangerous. Bianca Baldridge writes a lot about this savior mentality and saviorism. She's written a lot. She's written books. Also, highly recommend checking out her work. But yeah, similar to what Nikki said, I do think that it's really about the framing of the programs used to prepare teachers and train teachers, but also about the interviewers. So when you're running a school, if you're part of the HR team or part of the hiring committee, knowing what the language red flags are, so to speak, for people that do have that saviorism mentality, and looking for that in your interview process. And maybe if you do see those red flags, asking questions to see if that's a candidate that could possibly be pulled out of that mentality with training, with conversations, or if that's a candidate who is stuck in that mentality and has that as the only reason why they want to teach or want to come work in a school. And just being very mindful of that, and making sure we're not hiring people who do have that mentality and who are going to be stuck in that mentality as teachers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so, you know, both of you have mentioned this, and this is a question we had in the chat as well that I think is really important. Embedded and ingrained in this conversation is thinking a little bit more about teacher prep, teacher residency, and certification programs. And so, how can we change or reimagine them to better support teachers to hit the ground running in their first few years of school rather than needing this longer runway of 2 or 3 years?
So one way that I think that we can do that is we have to start having conversations up front about equity, about race, and about deficit thinking and things of that nature, and how it can have a negative impact or influence on students. If our programs don't revise their curriculum, right, and adopt more anti-racist curriculum, curriculum that is looking at deficit thinking and deficit mindset, and how do you shift that to an asset-based approach, culturally proficiency. Just we've got to start there. Here's why. Over 80% of our teachers are white. We're talking about Black and brown students. So if I don't spend time learning about, reflecting on the things that I don't know, because I can't know them, not at the level that my Black and brown students know them, because I'm not, well, I am, but the 80% of white teachers, they're not Black or brown. Yes, you can be an ally. Yes, you can empathize. Yet it's really important that we give teachers an experience with that. I participated in a training called Beyond Diversity, and it was very impactful. And there were some teachers there that it was their first year. I can't imagine the impact those teachers will have because they experience this PD early on in their career. So I think we have to be very purposeful about what we're teaching. We have to be very purposeful about the reflection that new teachers and teachers and in-service programs are doing. And we have to be very purposeful about the mentorship and about the support that we provide once they're on a campus. And it's okay to not get it right. It's okay to struggle forward, right? It's okay, but you got to start with something. So let's have these courageous conversations about race. Let's have these courageous conversations about disparities in discipline referral rates or in academic achievement data. Let's have these conversations about the inequities that show up in our data, but let's make a plan, right? Let's set goals for how we're going to accomplish that. And then let's check back to see how are we doing with that goal. It's not just a one and done. This is ongoing work, right? And it's important work because our students are the ones that suffer if we do not do the work.
I 100% agree with Nikki. One thing that I would add is in a lot of our teacher preparation programs, but even in undergrad or graduate programs that are meant to get teachers licensed and ready to teach, there's a lot of, I'll say, race neutral language in the curriculum. And I think that's also very harmful because it's almost like puts a blanket over the conversation and dissuades teachers from bringing up race and professors from bringing up race at all. It's really important to have those conversations. It's really important to have a curriculum that is built from diverse authors or diverse teachers and educators so that we can have those courageous conversations early and start to, retrain our brains before we get into the classroom.
Thank you so much, Patricia and Nikki. On behalf of Eric and me and Ed Trust, we're so grateful to have this conversation with you. Thank you, thank you. I'll let you both stay on in case you want to answer there's a couple of questions in the chat just for you both specifically. I've also offered my email address and Eric's email address. We're happy to get back to folks regarding their questions or to connect them with Nikki and Patricia. So thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And we look forward to publishing this report in November, and enjoy the amazing days that are boot camp. So thank you so much. Take care, everyone.